Hello. Today we're going to be speaking about the mind and how it works. This does tie a bit into the Kabbalistic lectures we've been giving recently. We're going to speak about different parts of the mind. We already addressed it in the bias lecture a few months ago. And we're going to speak specifically how to use your brain correctly. Not talk about biases or things like that, just how to process information and how to, what's the best way of learning. We've got a new subject. And basically, we're going to try and explain, hopefully, why I do this channel, right? Because I feel that however good, there's people much better than me, more knowledge than me on other channels. But the approach doesn't engender the best way for people to assimilate the information and to internalize it. Whereas the Ramchal is very famous in his simplicity and his way of thinking is based on the Kabbalah, by the way. We're going to see exactly how he thinks about thinking. He's got many books about the processes of the mind, how to think through things, how to understand what concepts are, etc. How to form ideas. So we're going to go through this book, Derech Hashem, right? Or The Way of God. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. This is the Feldheim edition, translated by Harriet Kaplan. So the question is, how do we think about things? Because when we get a new piece of information, some people tend to, just gobble it up and somehow process it in a way, and some people, they just get bombarded with different ideas and can't process it. So it's very useful for people who would like to understand how their brain works. And we're going to go through the Hakdama, the introduction to his book, which is only about 3 pages. We're just going to go through the English side because the Hebrew side is very terse, very hard language. And if I start making my own translation, it's going to slow things down because we've got ready-made translation here. Okay. And then we're going to start exploring the idea and how this relates. He doesn't speak out the Kabbalistic ideas. This is one of his non-Kabbalistic, one of the very few non-Kabbalistic books he has. He has written, most of his books are Kabbalistic, openly Kabbalistic. I mean, they speak about Sephiros and Partsufim and universes and things like that. Like we explained in our previous lecture last week on the Lag BaOmer lecture. So the history of the Ramchal is he was a very young boy or man when he wrote many of his Kabbalistic works. And this was after the Shabtai Tzvi debacle, which he had the pogroms of Tachvatat, and then the Jewish people were looking for salvation, and then Shabtai Tzvi came. This is the end of the 1600s, and people were desperate. Maybe this is the time Mashiach is coming, the Messiah will come. And there was this great man, or seemingly great man, called Shabtai Tzvi, and he convinced many rabbis even that he was the Messiah. There was one rabbi who noticed something, and he already, this is not the Messiah, there's something wrong with this person. And indeed, on his pilgrimage, he took massive number of Jewish people. I think it was just after a third or a half, or massive proportion of European Jewry got massacred in the pogroms by the Ukrainians, so he went on the pilgrimage with many Jewish people to go to Israel. He was going to be the Messiah, and as they came through Turkey, they said, "We're not having any of this. You convert to Islam." And the followers are thinking, well, obviously he's not going to use the Messiah. He's going to stand up to them. And he didn't. He buckled and he converted. And that caused an absolute disbelief in the Jewish people, and absolute total sort of giving up of hope of salvation, because they saw even the final hope that all this suffering and this massacre, proportionally worse than the Holocaust in terms of proportion of Jews killed. They thought the Messiah's coming, so it was all worth it in the long run, and it didn't happen. So they were very despondent and very, very suspicious of anyone teaching Kabbalah now, because Shabtai Tzvi was a big Kabbalist, and he was using Kabbalah as maybe one of his main selling tools to show his greatness, or right. So people were very, very cautious around Kabbalah. Now, in the early 1700s, I think the Ramchal was born in the year 1707, I believe, right? He was a young man in Italy. If he was in Genoa or another town in Italy first, maybe. And he was an absolute genius from a very young age, and he started writing Kabbalah, very deep Kabbalistic works, at the age of 13, 14, 15. And it was very strange as well, because he actually was clean shaven, which is very rare for a great rabbi to be clean shaven. There's ways where you can actually shave in a permitted way, as long as you don't use a razor. There's many other ways. You can use scissors, or there's other methods. You can use cream and things like that. There are ways of doing it in a permitted way, but it didn't fit in with the picture of people would have of someone who's a great sage. So they're looking at this young boy who's teaching all this Kabbalistic stuff, right? They thought that maybe he was a Sabbatean, that means a follower of Shabtai Tzvi, because he still had followers even in that time. So what they did, they took his books, they burnt them, right? Unfortunately, we don't have them. We don't have them today. And then he wrote some other works which were not openly Kabbalistic, like the Derech Hashem, the Way of God here, Das Tavunos, which my very first lecture about why evil has to exist is based on. Das Tavunos, Knowing Heart, and also Mesilas Yesharim, the very famous Musa, character building book he wrote, Path of the Just. Now, if you understand Kabbalah, you'll see the Kabbalah in all of his works. He's just hiding it in language which he uses everyday words to describe different ideas. But if you want to know what the technical sephiros or parzufim or oilamos or different concepts which are lying behind the basic words he's speaking about, you have to understand Kabbalah to see it. And Mesilas Yesharim is a beautiful one. Maybe I'll do a lecture on that one day. Maybe the Kabbalah series, maybe I'll show you how the 10 and the 5 line up there in his book. Now, in Derech Hashem, is speaking basically about the way of God, basically what's God doing. Yeah, he starts off with the nature of God himself, then he goes on to other fundamentals, the purpose of creation, right? What is man, etc. And he goes on, and what our purpose is, and the spiritual worlds, man in this world. It goes on, right? And then eventually he finishes off with certain, goes through different types of mitzvahs, commandments, to show what the place of those commandments is in the big picture. In the Hakdama, in the introduction, he speaks about how to think. So he says like this. Let's get started. Right, so this is, as we said, is one of his non-Kabbalistic works, but we're going to try seeing the Kabbalistic ideas behind it. Okay, which aren't that hard to see, to be honest. Okay, so introduction. When one knows a number of things and understands how they are categorized as systematically interrelated, right? So you've got lots of detailed pieces of knowledge, and you understand that this is part of this category, that's part of that category. What's the connection between these two ideas? Are these totally independent ideas, or is there a common theme behind them? Then he has a great advantage over one who has the same knowledge without such distinction. Yeah. So he's going to speak it out. It is very much like the difference between looking at a well-arranged garden, planted in rows and patterns, right? So you see, like, everything's nice and ordered, everything's discernible. You've got this patch here, that patch there, the carrots, the beans, and then this, you've got this sort of squared area for flowers, for roses, and then another one next to it for tulips, and the whole thing is nicely arranged, as opposed to seeing a wild thicket or forest growing in confusion. Okay, so in the forest, obviously, a human hasn't planted the seeds there, so the seeds, you can have flowers growing in the same place where a tree might be, and some vegetables, and it's all in chaos, basically. When an individual is confronted by many details and does not know how they relate to one another, or their true place in the general system, then his inquisitive intellect, so this is the problem of thinkers, of people who thrive for knowledge. Yeah? They give me more knowledge, and then they just get more knowledge, and as he says here, then his inquisitive intellect is given nothing more than a difficult, unsatisfying burden. So I've got another piece of knowledge which I'm trying to make sense of, right? Okay, it's just random details, and I can't see, I'm not feeling that these ideas are assimilated into my consciousness in a comfortable way, right? He may struggle with it, but he will tire and grow weary long before he attains any gratification. Each detail will arouse his curiosity, right? But not having access to the concept as a whole, he will remain frustrated, right? So that means you see many people who try learning this. Imagine you're trying to learn, I think for me, an amazing example is I don't understand how lawyers work, right? You have to memorize all these archaic sort of like contrived laws. I'm sure there's some sort of flow to them, but you have to remember this judgment, this ruling, this statute, and it seems there's so many details, but there's not really a theme which connects them all together, where if you just like understand the core of the law, then all the different things fall into place. They seem partially contrived or arbitrary. Yes, I find that very hard to understand, how lawyers manage to remember all those different laws and all the different details where they seem to be. Yeah, but maybe there is a way of learning that as well. Yeah. If one wishes to understand something, it is therefore very important that he be aware of other things associated with it as well as its place among them. So therefore, if I'm learning something about let's say prophecy, God talks to man, fine, okay, great, that's very nice. What's that? How does that help me? So you have to understand it in the context of the bigger picture. God's got a plan for mankind, and part of that plan is to give man a task, and we explained why God did that in the very first lecture about why evil exists. The first lecture on this channel, we always go back to that one because it's just so fundamental. Everything hinges on that. You're going to see that is the big picture which everything is hinging on. So you're going to understand how I do my channel here, right? And I'll tell you the secrets now. Okay, it's not that I'm extremely clever, which I'm quite clever, thank God, but because I've got the method of the Ramchal, I'm able to understand much more than a person on a similar intellectual level would be able to, because of just the way I process information based on this chapter. I learned this, one of the very few books I actually read when I was younger and as a teen, and yes, it had a profound influence on me. So it's really molded the way I think my whole life, really. It really talks to me, this. Right, so I thought I'd do a favour for hopefully someone else out there who might appreciate this. Okay, so if one wishes to understand something, is therefore very important they be aware of other things associated with it as well as its place among them. So you have to see that if we're talking about a detail, right, then it's not an isolated detail, it's actually part of a set, right? Or this is basically this might be a fundamental concept which might branch out into other ideas. So you have to connect these ideas to this thing. Is this a detail, or is this more of a overarching concept? Without this, one's longing for truth will be frustrated and will be pained by his unsatisfied desire. Okay? So if you just learn details, you just get a whole deluge of confusing noise from all these different pieces of information, and you're trying to juggle them all in your head, and you don't have a way of consolidating them in your mind. The exact opposite is true when one knows something in relation to its context. Right? So you say it's not just a way of coping with it, it's the opposite. Since he sees it within its framework, he can go on to grasp other concepts associated with it, and his success will bring him pleasure and elation. Right? So you've got these two people. Right? One of them is like the person who... Is he going to speak this out? Yeah, even if he does, I'll say it now. So if we take the analogy of the garden, the person's planting this and that, right? And then he's got a new seed. What is it? It's avocado. Avocado is really a tree. It's a type of tree which uses a lot of water, maybe, and it's actually got larger branches. So maybe we've got to put a place with a large space amongst the trees, but in a way where it doesn't kind of sort of like cover them up, right? So we need a bigger place for an avocado tree, yeah? Oh, we've got some onions. Okay, that makes sense to put it near the vegetables. So yeah, so when I'm uprooting the vegetables and picking the vegetables, this will be nearby. And you know, aesthetically it looks nice as well, because you see the bulbs growing and the sprouts there. So it makes sense to put it near other similar looking things, but you know, with a nice border, right? So when he gets something new, he knows how to put it in the garden in such a way where it enhances the garden. Whereas the other person, he's just got a whole mess, right? You've got the carrots growing the same place as the tulips, the potatoes growing right next to the roses, and one rose is on the other side of the potatoes, and it's all chaos there. Now, when he brings something in, yet there isn't a system onto which he can add on these new seeds or this new plant or tree. So therefore, he's forced to just put it somewhere, and that would just end up with more frustration. He would have an even messier garden now because of this, and that will cause him more frustration. Whereas the other person, not only does he have a garden which functions, but every time he gets something new, it doesn't make things worse. It actually does the opposite. It makes things better. You've got a much more beautiful picture now. Okay? You see, like I like to give the analogy of a jigsaw, right? Yeah, you've got certain things, right? Okay, so you're trying to build up the whole picture. In the case of what I deal with, is the whole picture of God's plan and the nature of reality, right? So you've got the main pivot around everything revolves, is the idea of the reason why God creates the world, for what purpose he creates the world, is to do good, and everything builds out of that, right? What exactly is the ultimate pleasure? It's the realization of the total unity of God's existence. That means you're getting as close to the source of everything possible, and that is the idea of God's oneness, because the more pluralistic and the more disparate things are, the less you are in contact or aware of the ultimate truth which lies behind everything, which is a unity, a singularity, if you want to put it like that, which is God's existence itself, right? Right, so that's the central part. So like in the jigsaw, you've got the central picture. Let's say it's a picture of, let's say, a house by a river, and it's got a garden at the front, right? So the thing is, and let's say the house is the prominent thing in the picture. Okay, so that's the thing where, oh, you build the picture. Okay, so we've got pieces for the house. Let's try understanding the house. Okay, fine. So you put all the brick-coloured things in one section. Oh, yeah, but in there you've got a window and you've got a door. So you put those pieces sort of nearby the house. You know they're connected somehow to the house in the jigsaw. This is all an analogy for the way the brain processes concepts. But so let's start building the house the best we can, and let's start building the door. But how does it connect with the door? Oh, I see the bigger picture now. Right, the door is on the ground floor of the house, and obviously we know what a door is. It's a way you actually get to enter the house, right? And then you go to the roof on top of it. So you've got you're creating context for the roof and the door. Now, imagine a person is just making a door and a roof and bricks and water and grass and plants and a fence, and he doesn't put them together. That's not a jigsaw. That's just some random bits which happen to fit together. There's no pleasure in that. The pleasure is when you put things in and you see how everything relates to everything else in the right format, in the right set of relationships they have to each other, right? And you see the categories and the details of the categories, then that gives pleasure because you see the whole picture, right? So therefore, for example, the idea of God's plan that we just said, but then that branches out. Then you go into the details, right? Which are the commandments. How does each commandment relate to God's overall plan? Which part of God's plan is this corresponding to? We went through a lot of the festivals. Each one corresponds to a different facet of God's plan. So you see how they all fit and attach themselves to that central core. So you see a beautiful picture. We spoke about our very first Hanukkah lecture, the difference between the Greeks and the Jews, the way they look at beauty. Right? The Greek beauty is a superficial beauty. It looks at the harmony of things which are on the surface, just physical beauty. The beauty of the human body, right? How it functions, how it's got an aesthetic pleasingness to the eye, to see a nice structure, right? And function, and the human mind, science, yeah, the study of the external part of the world, right? How things function. But then the Jewish way of looking is the light of the first day, if you remember. We look in the inside, we're building a beautiful picture of concepts, as opposed to a picture of functioning. We're looking at a picture of concepts which will lie behind the laws of nature, let's say, right? The ideas of the why, as opposed to the what. Okay, so that is how Humana thinks. So we'll break it down and we'll try to understand what that is. We'll try to make this idea fit in with the big picture itself. Okay, let's just finish off. When one studies a subject, he must therefore be aware of the place of each element within the most general scheme. Okay, when one takes into account existence as a whole, including everything imaginable, that's the set of everything, whether detectable by our senses or conceivable by our minds, then he recognizes that things are not all in the same category and level, right? The categories are both varied and numerous. As they vary, so do the rules and principles associated with them. In order to comprehend the true nature of each thing, one must also be able to recognize these distinctions. So we will look at each thing. So what's the difference between prophecy and not eating on Yom Kippur? Okay, wait, 1 minute. So not eating Yom Kippur is one of the commandments. It's a negative commandment. It's in the category of the festivals. So it's got something to do with the rectifications which the festivals do, right? And how does Yom Kippur fit in with the whole spectrum of the different festivals, right? It's connected with the idea of justice, but the idea of mercy and justice, the idea of, if you look at the 5-stage process, it's the idea where we get to the stage where evil is completely subjugated by good. That's why we don't eat, because the physical desires are being pressed and suppressed by the spiritual. Yeah, that's why we like angels, right? As opposed to prophecy, which is completely unconnected. You could probably make a connection if you trace them back close to the central idea of why God does everything, right? But prophecy is a concept to do with God's plan and his communication with man. It's the second stage. God creates a world, then he communicates with man, and then through that he brings the universe to its final resting point, which is spelt out essentially in the 13 principles. Yeah? The first 5 are to do with God's existence, the next 4 to do with God's his communication with man and his transmission of his task for them, and the final 4 are to do with the final destination, which is the world to come, and the final resting place of mankind and the universe as a whole in the most sublime pleasure possible, which is the closeness to God himself. Okay, so prophecy is part of the subcategory of the second stage. Right, how do you connect that with Yom Kippur? Let me think for a few seconds. Maybe I can make a connection based on the concepts. It's very hard because they're very different categories. Yeah, yeah. There is a connection, but it's so far up the tree that you forget about the details of the thing itself. Yeah, they're ultimately just 2 tools of God revealing his oneness in the world, right? He does that by us suppressing the evil, and that's part of the process to do it. And prophecy also does that in a parallel way by revealing the higher power, which is God, and imprinting it on the lower world, on the physical world, which is man. And it's sort of the domination of the spiritual over the physical. So you've got a parallel there, right? But it's all based on the Kabbalistic idea, which we spoke about in the last lecture, of the covenant symptom, about the idea of the rectifying force acting upon the entity which needs rectification, and the force of completion and perfection acting upon the imperfect, and making it in the process of making it perfect, right? So both of them relate to that idea. Okay, so you see there's connections everywhere, right? If you want, you have to be precise with your thinking, otherwise the whole thing gets wishy-washy. Otherwise your jigsaw will look like you've got this is a house, it's just the house has got a bit of water on where the window should be, and it's got a tree where the door is, where the half of the door is. Yeah, it's just a weird looking house. No, you've lost the structure completely then. Okay. There are, however, let's carry on, certain primary elements that must be recognized as part of the essential nature of each concept. Okay? Out of all the levels and categories, one should be able to distinguish the following, right? So this is a fundamental way of looking at things. The whole and the part, right? Is this the whole thing, or is it part of the thing? The general and the particular, right? Are you speaking generally, or are you speaking about details, right? The cause and the effect. You've got sometimes a correlation is not the same as causality, right? You have fat people eat more ice cream than thin people. What's the chicken and the egg in this case, right? Is it because they're fat, they're generally more hungry and therefore they'll eat more ice cream? Or is it because they've got a sweet tooth and they eat ice cream that causes them to be fat? Or maybe it's both. Maybe it's a reciprocal relationship. So again, you have to know what's the cause, what's the effect. And the object itself and its associated qualities. Then the classic example is God, right? We speak about those two aspects of God. We've got God himself, right? And his associated qualities are the way he expresses himself and reveals himself to mankind, right? Or on a more simple level, you've got the idea of a table, right? A table is something with a top and legs to support it, right? That's what table is. Is a drawer in the table an intrinsic part of the essence of what a table is, or is it just happen to be something which you can create an association with the table? And we know you can have tables without drawers coming out of them, like a regular table, not a desk. Yeah, so therefore a drawer is not something which is intrinsically part of the definition of a table. Okay, so you have to know each one. So that's how you sort things out in your mind. And then you'll be able to sort things out and put them in the right categories. You'll be able to say, oh, this is a very fundamental idea. I can build a lot on this idea. Most of my lectures are geared to speaking about those central ideas. Even the lectures which are not the keystone lectures, which are the absolute core of everything. Many of if not most of my lectures are focusing on core ideas within those categories. Like in the festivals, I'm focusing on the core ideas of the festivals, as opposed to looking at just details without showing how they relate to the core. Especially this year's Passover, Pesach lecture, I go through almost all the commandments to do with the Passover and show how they all connect with this overarching idea of Pesach is the archetype of how God brings the world to its perfection, going from the lowest worlds, the worlds of evil, the worlds of mixture of good and evil, the physical world, the spiritual, etc. Right? How they all combine together. That's all brought out in the laws there. Okay. So for people who listen to all my lectures, you're going to be lighting up here because you're going to appreciate all those references I've given. You're going to say, oh, that's what he's doing there, right? That's one examines something. Oh, still got a bit to go. When one examines something, he should first determine whether it's a whole or a part of a whole, a general category or a detail. Is it a cause or effect, an object, or a property of the object? When he realizes its place in the general scheme, he can then recognize the elements needed to complete his understanding and provide a precise general picture. Now you know what each thing is, then you can start saying, right, okay, so if this is part of that category, there's another 3 things I know which are in this category. Let's see, how do these things relate to each other, the things in the category itself, right? If it's a part, then he will look to discover the whole. There's only part of the concept, but so what's the whole concept? And that's just a part of it. Good. If it's a particular case, he'll seek to find the set or the category. If it's a cause, he'll seek its effect, or if it's an effect, he'll seek the cause. If he finds something to be a quality, he'll understand what's it a quality of, right? And if it's an object, let's try finding its qualities. Because one day I might learn about the quality of something. It's one of the qualities of this object, which I already worked out previously. So you start to put the pieces together, right? You've got the house, and you've got the pieces of light blue, which are the sky, darker blue for the river, the green, which is the grass. You've got the brown, which is the fence. You start to put them together and say, oh, right. So I had a brown piece there before. I couldn't see where it fit in, right? Because it had a bit of blue in it. That didn't make sense to me. Oh, it's a bit where you can see through the fence onto the river. So that must go there. Perfect. That's how they link together. Beautiful. Okay. He will also strive to ascertain what kind of quality it is. What type of quality is this object owning and portraying and revealing of itself? Whether it precedes, accompanies, or follows the subject, and whether it's intrinsic or accidental. That means, is it something which has to be part of it, or is it something which happens to be part of it, like the case of the drawer in the table, right? It's something which comes after the table's made, right, as appendage to the table to make the table more useful, right? All these are distinctions without which one cannot have a complete picture of anything's true nature. So you need to know the thing itself, its qualities, how it relates to greater concepts, or if it's got its own subcategories, how it relates to other concepts of equal hierarchy. Beyond this, one must look into the nature of the thing itself, determining whether it involves an absolute or limited concept. If the concept is limited, he should ascertain what are its limits, right? Since even when the concept itself is true, it loses that truth and that veracity when placed in a different framework where this doesn't work anymore. It's not meant to work in this situation. It's like, right, the best type of pen might be like a £2,000, I don't know, biro or something, which is made with a certain type of metal, a certain type of ink. It's perfect, right? It's the best thing possible, right? So, but you want to eat a piece of cake again. Here I'm on my cake analogies again. So you take the pen. This is the best pen possible, so you can easily also eat cake. No, it's got nothing to do with it. Using the wrong tool for the object you're trying to manipulate, right? If you've got a piece of paper, or you've got a piece of card, or anything which is meant to have writing on it, this is going to be the best pen for it. Okay. So it loses its veracity when placed in an improper framework or taken outside of its area of validity. Okay, right? It's got to be placed within the framework correctly as well. If you start writing on the edge of the paper, it also won't work because it'll keep slipping off, and you can't really write anything in a single dimension. You need 2 dimensions to write on. Okay, it's also important to realize that the number of individual details is so great that it is beyond the power of the human mind to embrace them and know them all. You have to have some humility. Details, you cannot know all the details because the mind cannot cope with millions of details. So how do you do it? So one's goal should therefore be to attain the knowledge of the most general concepts. So when we're focusing on learning, on understanding, focus on the bigger picture, the bigger concepts. And this can apply to non-Torah ideas as well. If you're learning any subject, mathematics, right? Or we said law. Law is an example, right? So understand, there's 3 categories of interpersonal assault or something like that. I think a policeman spoke it out with me once. You got was it emotional, physical, and there's another one between men and women, that type, right? Each one of them's their own category, and that's broken into 5 levels of severity. There's a threat, action, there's whatever, aggravated, things like that, aggravated assault, right? You've got premeditated, right? These are all subcategories in the different, those 3 different categories of damages of man to man, as opposed to man to property. Okay, right? So breaking into concepts. So now I understand. So when a person learns about a person did a certain action to someone else, like he threw something at someone, but it splashed into water behind him, and it damaged his clothing, and the clothing was sensitive to water, or something crazy like that. How do you remember such a thing? Well, you go back to base principles, and I remember there was a nuance in the way they thought about this case. Yeah, is that because the intention overrides the fact that he was unlucky at the end, so that concept overrides that concept, and maybe that's how lawyers remember cases. I don't know, but I'm just suggesting maybe that's how they do it, because they're thinking about the principles and they're just trying to apply them the best they can. And when you've got these sort of arbitrary rulings, you're trying to understand where the judge was coming from as your precedent for the case which you're working on. Okay. By its very nature, every general category includes many details. When a person grasps a single general concept, he automatically includes a large number of particular cases. Right? That's what we do in the channel the whole time. Right? Although every lecture is just another particular of the bigger picture, of the bigger archetype. It's just an offshoot, it's a product of God's overall plan, right? You have to see how it relates. Although he might not be sufficiently aware of them to recognize them as elements of the general concept, he does have the ability to do so when confronted by them, right? Okay. I'm going to have to read the Hebrew for that one. I see. Once he is aware of the general principle, he will not be at a loss to recognize the details that cannot exist without it. Yeah. So you might not be aware straight away that this new idea you're learning is actually part of a bigger picture, as a part of a greater category, or it's a detail. But once you come across it and you know the category, you'll be able to start making the associations, understanding how it relates to the greater category. This is what our sages meant when they told us words of the Torah should always be in your hands as general principles rather than as individual details. So for those Hebrew readers, it's in the Sifri in Hazinu, Perek Lamed Beis, Posuk Beis, right at the beginning of the Sifri. It's a midrash. Lolim yudv'sora b'yodecha klolim v'leprotim. The words of the Torah should be in your hands as rules as opposed to details. When dealing with general principles, however, one must be very careful to grasp all their aspects and areas of validity. Okay? You can't just leave it in the general realm. Even elements that initially seem to be superfluous should not be ignored. Don't think, oh yeah, so that's that idea, and we don't care about the details. No, the details are what makes up the totality of the category, right? The category is made up of its parts, right? So it's important to understand the details, even ones which seem to be superfluous, but should be carefully preserved and taken to heart. Our sages thus said, there's nothing in the Torah that is empty. There's nothing empty in the Torah that, if expounded, does not yield reward in this world, with the main principal reward coming in the world to come. There's no principle, great or small, that does not have the potential for teaching something about its particulars. Right? So basically every detail you can put into the picture. Everything, without exception. So therefore, you should strive to put it in the best you can. Sometimes we're not able to. It seems a bit too hard to bridge the gap between has this detail go into the general concept. So you make a sort of a subcategory. It's in this subcategory, but don't see how the subcategory really. But that's how you do it. That's the process of learning. You start to build up this sort of network of ideas. Okay? Even when the general principle does not apply to some of its particulars, it may still be very important in respect to others, right? So that's the idea of the exceptions to the rule, I guess. Every general rule must contain necessary information regarding all of its particular cases, right? So if something is a subcategory, if you understand the general concept of the category, you have to see it coming out in some way in the details. Okay? A person must therefore be very careful when dealing with such principles. He should be very precise in examining their concepts, relationships, and connections, as well as the manner in which one concept is inferred from the other. Right? So you have concepts which are connected in a static way, but also you can have a line of logic. This thing implies something else. Right? From the beginning to the end. If one does this, he will be successful and gain insight. Okay? Taking all this into consideration, I've written this small book, right, Very humble of him. My intent was to set forth general principles of Jewish belief and religion, expounding its true nature in such a way that it can be clearly understood to provide an adequate picture, free of ambiguity and confusion. Right? So he's going to speak out the ideas in Judaism, right? The roots and the branches are presented according to their place in the general scheme, so that the concept as a whole should be absorbed and understood with the greatest possible clarity. Okay? This book should thus provide a basis from which the general theological concepts found in the Torah and its commentaries should be readily discerned. Okay? So he's saying, learn my book first, then learn the Torah, and you'll see how all the ideas of the Torah, how they're all part of one big whole. As it says in the Torah itself, Torah Achas Lachem, it's one Torah for you. The whole Torah is as a one entity. I've explained on the Kabbalistic level, the whole Torah is essentially one name of God, which means one expression from the Creator himself, the oneness of the Creator, and the letters are just the details. You've got verses, you've got words, which are subcategories of the verses, you've got letters or subcategories of the words, or details which make up the words, details which make up the whole, which is the word, right? Right? That's why the idea of the kollel in the gematria works, right? The kollel is, you'll see sometimes the numerical value of a word can add up to, let's say, 49. It's a classic one, right? And sometimes the rabbis say, okay, which is the same as this word, but if you work it out, this word is 50. So what do you mean, 50? So we say, oh, there's a kollel, you can add one on. What do you mean you add one on? Was it cheating? Is it a joke? What is it? The idea is, there's the idea of the sum of the parts are not equal to the whole. If you've got 49 elements, let's say you've got a word which is made up of 3 letters. Yeah, when you say the word, you're saying something different from the 3 letters, but the whole word is made completely up of the letters. Bit paradoxical, but think about it. You've got the 3 letters, and you've got the unification of the 3 details, the 3 letters. You unify them to make a word, right? And you put words together to make a sentence. So you have an extra thing. When you've got 3, you've really got 4. You've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. The unity of all of them. By the way, that corresponds to the Sephira of Malchus. That's what Malchus does. Malchus is the final of the 10 spheres, which takes all the other 9 and it unifies them together in a whole concept in order to transmit it to the next entity, which is the higher entity is meant to be passed on to. Classic example would be children, right? So you take all your knowledge, make it work physically as well, but we'll do it in an intellectual way. It's a bit easier. I've learned this. Okay, now I've consolidated my knowledge. Now I can start teaching my pupil or my child, right? How can I do it? Because I've got the whole picture now. And so now I'm able to teach him. When they're receiving my teaching, they're getting bits. But it's coming from my unified sort of ball of knowledge, right? This sort of uniform, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. So I'm taking bits. I can't tell him everything I know in one go. It's impossible, right? But I can use words. Words break pieces off of that big thing, and I give it to him, and he starts to reassemble them. And hopefully, I'll be there, right? The teacher's there to help them reassemble it themselves, right? And that way, you can get a transmission from one generation to the other, and making sure everything's conserved very nicely, right? But it takes time, and it takes dedication, commitment. Okay, but that's the idea of Malchus. Yeah, the sphere of Malchus represents this idea of consolidating things together in a way where they can now be revealed to someone else, and it makes sense to the person you're trying to give to. Just like light waves come off a person, right? I've got the whole structure of my face is necessary for someone to recognize me. Okay, but the thing which actually does the revealing of my face to someone else, so someone recognizes me, is light. So light is that thing which transmits, and it takes everything together and when you look at me, you're not looking at a hair here, eyelash here, a skin cell there, yeah, or even a nose here, an eye here, or a mouth here. You're looking at my whole face. You're recognizing a wholeness, a oneness. Okay. So that's how you have to learn Torah. Okay. All its secrets will then be within your grasp according to the blessing of God which He bestows upon you. That's quoting a verse, Kibirkas Hashem Lekecha Asher Yiten Lach. Okay. I worked to arrange these concepts in the order that seemed most suitable and in language considered most appropriate to provide a complete picture of what I deemed necessary. That's why it's very hard to read this book in Hebrew, because the language is very, very precise. So you have to break your head to understand what's he saying here. Oh, he's really speaking quite deep here about this concept. Okay, I'm getting the picture now, okay? We're going to speak about this in a minute, about how the mind actually processes. You should therefore go through this work carefully, diligently, remembering each fact until you find use for it. Right? Because he's telling you, you'll have a lot more success doing this book than other works, because he's making sure that everything in this book is a category and a big concept. So if you memorize them, that will be part of you remembering the picture. It's like you're trying to do the jigsaw based off the picture on the box, right? So what do you look at? You don't look at every single detail. Okay, there's a little bit of blue there on top of this part of that third of the way up the roof, and you don't look at that. You look, okay, I've got the picture. Okay, there's a house. There's a bit of blue there and there because of the sky. There's a river which runs down the side here. There's a fence, grass. There's a few plants in the grass. You can remember that as well. You've got the house. And what's the house look like? It's got two doors. Okay, got about 3 sets of windows. Got the roof there, right? So what you're doing is you're looking at the concepts. Now each concept is very useful for trying to. So now when I've got a piece, I'm thinking back to, all right, so this looks like probably part of the roof. This. Oh no, it's not. It's actually part of the brickwork, but a darker part of the brickwork, which the colours resemble the roof. Okay. So, but you had the options. You definitely knew it wasn't part of the sky, right? Because you've got all the concepts in place already. Do not overlook any detail, for you may be neglecting a vital concept. Okay, so you can't rush through this book and just, all right, this seems pretty straightforward. No, everything's necessary here. Read each word carefully, try to grasp the essence of each idea and remember each thing accurately. You will then attain the greatest benefit and gratification from this book. I've called the book The Way of God, Derech Hashem, since it speaks of God's ways as revealed by His prophets and taught in His Torah. These are the ways in which God directs both ourselves and everything else He has created. The book is divided into 4 sections. The first discusses the general basis of all existence and its details. So that's your big category. And the other 3 chapters are going to be subcategories of the big category, right? The second section deals with God's providence. The third with God's prophecy. And the fourth with the religious observance. That's the actual mitzvahs, the commandments themselves, and the practical keeping of the commandments. And now, fellow seekers of God, go on your way. May God be with you, giving you eyes to see and ears to hear the wonders of His Torah. Amen. Ken Yeratzon. May it be His will. Very nice. So let's just expand this idea briefly. Hopefully briefly. Didn't expect this to go on. I thought it would be a short one today. In Kabbalah we have the 10 spheres, but we've got 4 which are associated with the head. You've got the idea of Keser, which is actually above the head. That's the place where we put the Tefillin, the Shorosh, the Phylacteries, put the box on top of our head. The place where the baby's head is still soft after being born, because when the baby comes through the birthing canal, the bones sort of compact and they overlap over each other. When it comes out, they sort of move back into place. But then there has to be a fusing process, and that the brains, you don't want to have a flexible a skull, so the bones start to fuse over the following months until the top's hardened. And that's when the baby generally starts to speak, is when it gets hardened. You don't have that soft part of the baby's head where you can actually feel the pulse there. Okay, you're not going to touch that part. Yeah. Never know what happens if you push too hard. Never tried that. Okay, better be safe than sorry. So that is the idea. That's the first stage of knowledge, is coming from above, and this reflects the Gemara, the Talmud, in 30b in Tractate Nida, where it speaks about what happens inside the womb, spiritually and physically. So spiritually, what's happening is that the actual embryo is studying the Torah, being taught to him by a malach, by an angel, and it describes a ner. There's a light burning above its head. Obviously, it's not a physical candle; it's a spiritual influx of God's light, the light of the Torah, and it learns the whole Torah. And then when it gets born, the angel taps it on its lip, and it forgets the learning. Okay, there's a whole lecture in itself, exactly the meaning of all these different elements. But you see, the idea is, keser is the idea when you receive something from above, from beyond yourself. So the keser is the crown, literally, is the idea of reaching out to something which is outside of you. If you remember our diagram with the five stages of persona, what's it called? Pronoun persona, or modal persona. We have me, you, him, there is, yes, and there isn't. I have no concept of it at all. Keser corresponds to that thing I have no concept at all. Why? Because it's not in you at all. That knowledge is outside of you. The second part of the Sephiros is Chochmah, which is wisdom. Wisdom is the idea of the right brain, it's conceptual thinking. You're grasping the idea as a flash of a concept where everything's contained in the concept, but there's no details yet. You're trying to work something out, and I said, "Oh, I've got it." Say, "Well, yeah, go on." Say, "Give me a second," and you start to process it in your mind until you get to the level where you can start to speak it out. Now, a lot's going on in that process there. Right? It happens very fast, depending how fast your processing power of your mind is. You have the flash of inspiration, and you feel, it's weird, you feel all the details are in there, but you can't identify any details yet. Then you use your left brain, which takes the concept and starts pulling out ideas and start to build a structure. You start to create some sort of structured concept where you can identify details now. Right? Now, once you've got that picture very clear, now I see the whole picture with its details. Now I can assimilate it and feel happy. Remember what the Ramchal said, right? But once a person's learnt the correct way, then it causes him happiness and contentment. Then he's been koina the knowledge. He's acquired the knowledge. It's part of him. That's the das. That's the das, is when all the knowledge has come together, and you understand the category and its details as one totality. Then it's in your das. That's the back of the head. That's the back of the. This is exactly what the tefillin are. The tefillin, you've got the phylacteries, the box with the scrolls above the head there. Then you've got the two straps around the right side of the brain and the left side, and then you've got the knot at the back where the da'as is, and then you've got the other straps which go over the whole body, which corresponds to the other 7 sephiros, the 7 characteristics of a person, right, or qualities, right, which are the more emotional and physical ones, right? That's the idea of bringing your thoughts into practice. That's the spinal cord, the stem of the spine. I can't remember what it's called exactly. The cerebral stem or the spinal stem, whatever. It's a place where the brain starts to go into the spinal cord, which of course controls the physical body. That's da'as, right? We spoke about da'as a lot in our lecture about biases, in our proofs series. So you have the flash, you have the knowledge coming from outside you, then it's a flash inside your mind, Then you bring out the details with your left brain. That's Binah. Binah is Mevin Dova Mitoch Dova. You're differentiating. Binah comes from the word Bain. Bain means in between, right? Or Boinem, which means to build, right? You're building up a structure by differentiating by different parts. And you start to say, well, okay, you've got a few ideas here. Let's break them up. Right, this belongs here, that belongs there. This relates to that, that relates to that. The whole thing makes a structure which kind of looks like this, right? Oh, and then take a step back. Oh, I see the whole picture. And when I want, I can zoom in and look at the details. So you've got the totality of the concept now. Then that's da'as. Now you can internalize it. It's not something which is kind of you're juggling in the air. You've got a concept, you've got details. I feel confident about it now. That's called arichas safasayim, and that's the idea of that you've arranged it in your mouth. And now you're able to express the idea and say it to someone else because now it's part of you. You can only express something which is part of you, right? I could try explaining something which I heard from someone else, which I don't quite understand. I could, if I memorize the words he said verbatim, right? The only other way I can speak out what I heard from someone else is if there's some element of assimilation of the ideas into my core, into my awareness, when I can give it over, right? So there's a difference between, let's say, it's like how a person might know his timetables, right? What's 17 times 33? Okay, so you have to work it out. So go through base principles. 10 times 33, I'll show you a quick trick to do it. 17 and 33 are 16 away from each other. So they're both 8 away from 25. So it's basically going to be 25 squared minus the square of 8. So it's going to be 625 minus 64 is going to be, don't test me now, 575, 561, I think. 561, does that make sense? 33 times 17, yeah, 561, right? So what did I do then? I had the idea, I had the principles in the head, I had a rule, a trick even, right? And then I went into the details, and then I was able to work out the answer. And now, if it's an important number, I memorize it forever. 33 times 17 is 561. I hope that's right. That's be a bit embarrassing otherwise. Yeah, it is, yeah. Right. However, if I ask you what's 4 times 4, well, most people would just say 16 straight away. Why? They're not using these parts of the brain because it's part of them. It's part of who you are. Right? Ask someone, what's the name of your third cousin? So you have to, third cousin, that one. Oh, yeah, him. You're using your intellect because it's not something which is that part of you where you can access immediately. If something is truly 100% part of you, you'll be able to say it straight away. What's your name? Adam. Finished. It takes no time. It's just intrinsic knowledge. It's knowledge which is at one with who I am. So this is the process that Ramchal is speaking about now, essentially, right? And then obviously after das, then you put the thoughts into practice because you feel the thoughts so clearly, it obliges you to act according to what you know with conviction now and clarity. That's what we're talking about here. Ramchal is trying to give us knowledge which gives us clarity. Bias stops us getting that clarity. That's what I was talking about in that lecture. If you want to go back, you'll see the deeper element of what I was saying there. Okay. So these are the 4 stages of knowledge. Okay. So what are we essentially doing? We're taking a whole first. Yeah, Chochmah. Let's start with the Chochmah. You're taking a look at the whole picture. Then, very nice. The whole picture, very nice. Okay. I got awareness. I can't do anything with that idea. Right? Right? It's a unity. It's a unity of a concept. But to make it useful, practically, I need to break it into its parts. When you break it into its parts, you've smashed the concept now. You're losing the concept. So you have to keep, okay, right, this detail. Oh, let's create, I don't want to forget the actual overall picture. So you go from there, details, more details, more details. Oh, quick, but then, and then you go back to the concept and you start to relate the concept and try to rebuild the concept using the details. That's called Binah. Chochmah is rearrange the letters is koyach ma, it's potential ma of what, right? It's just something. Remember we spoke about the 5 modal personae? Yeah, you've got ayin, which is nothingness. That means you get the idea from someone which is outside of you. Then it goes into your mind. That's yesh, that's something, right? But you can't identify that something. It's something from nothing. Then you've got Binah, which is the 3rd stage. I think we should bring that up just for reference. I think it'll be really useful. Okay, here we go. I think I just messed up my setup, but hopefully it will still work. Where are we here? Okay, right, so let's just lock this in. Okay, fine. Right, so having a look at the diagram, the table here. Remember we spoke about the 5 partsufim. Yeah, right, and they correspond to Keser, which is the highest one. That corresponds to down here, ayin, nothingness. Then you've got Chochmah, which is wisdom. That you see the word koyach, kaf, ches, and the word ma, which means what. In fact, you've got the word ma here for those who don't speak Hebrew. You can see the similarities there. Ma means what. Okay, it's the potential of what. What is it? It's just something that corresponds to level 2. Yesh, something, being, is. Something is there, but you still can't identify it. Then the 3rd stage, you've got Binah, which is understanding. You've got the binyan there. Ben, by the way, it's very, I just realized this now. Wow, you've got ma and ben in these 2 words, just like here. I have to ask someone what the significance of that is. Of course, ma and ben are the male and the female of the next generation, the son and daughter. Chochmah and Binah are the father and the mother, the male and the female of the middle generation. Interesting. Okay, I'm sure there's a connection there. Binah is where, right, so Binah is the understanding, that's the left brain. Did I write it down here? What part of the body it is? No, I wrote it in the other diagram. This is the fontanelle, this is the right brain, left brain, and then da'as is not on this diagram because it doesn't fit in cleanly with the partsufim. It's actually the lower part of Ab and Ima together, which is the lower part of Chochmah and Binah together. So it's the back of the head basically, where the right and left join. And that corresponds to who, which means he, right? Because now you're identifying something, okay? And then you've got you and I, which correspond to the next levels of the body. You and I are much more imminent, because you have a person's more exposed to someone's body than it is to their mind. The body is more apparent. Okay, so hopefully you can see me as before. Right, so that's the idea. So you've got the keser, that's the thing which comes from the ayin, from the nothingness. Then the chochmah is the chochmah, it's the yesh, it's something there. But then you break it into its details. I can identify things now. Oh yes, you got this detail and that. I can see him now, as referring to the concept, right? And then da'as, you unify them together at the back of the head, right? Which is the totality of recognition of the concept. That's the real he. The totality. I see him completely now. Right. So if you notice this pattern, now we've connected it with the sefiros. So what we're doing essentially, we're looking at the whole, breaking into its parts, and then reconnecting the parts to the whole to create something new. This should be setting off alarm bells in your mind if you're sensitive to these things. If you've been listening to my lectures, right? This is the archetype of the whole of creation. This is the 3 stages which you spoke about of Adam Kadmon, right? The very highest of the 5 worlds. Remember, there were 3 stages which encompass the whole of the process of creation until its perfection. Akudim, Remember the 10 sephiros, the 10 emanations. The first time God reveals his 10 attributes to outside of him, that's revealed through akudim, which means bound together. That means the 10 sephiros, which are all one. There's 10, but they're indistinguishable. There's still a oneness. They're still bound together. You can see all 10 sephiros, but there's still a oneness, right? That's like Vayir Vayir Yom Echad. Yeah, and there was day and night. Genesis chapter 1 verse 5. Yom Echad, day one, not the first day. The day one, the day the rabbis say this change of the form of the number one, instead of saying the first, like it says first, second, third, it says Yom Echad, day one. Because it's telling us an extra detail that change from first to one is saying on this day, even though there's light and dark, God was still one. Why? Because this is the light of the Sephiros, the light of the 10 Sephiros, were in such a way we could still see the unity of God, right? God only had one expression, yeah? Even though there were different parts, but at this stage of the creation, he was revealing his power or his light through 10 different entities, but they were still unified. So therefore, you were able to perceive that there's a oneness behind that portrayal and emanation of the light, of the 10 spheros. Then got the second day, and that's, if you remember the lecture about the 10 plagues and the 10 sayings, yeah, remember that Chochmah corresponds to the creation of light. Yeah, the plague of darkness corresponds to that. That's Chochmah. And Binah, which is understanding, the left side, that's the second day of creation, where God separates the high and low worlds. Now you've got machalok, you've got argument, you've got plurality. That's the idea of Binah, breaking things into the parts. Right? And the third day, you have harmony again, right? That's the idea of the land and the water, right? Okay, exactly how that works, but it's the idea of the final coming together where things finally end up in the state of perfection. On one level, that's what the third day was, right? It says ki tov twice. Because when God said, "Let the waters be gathered in," and God said it should, and God saw it was good, and then He said, "Let there now be vegetation on the ground," which has been just revealed, like the dry land. Now there'll be vegetation, and God saw it was good. Right? Some people get married on Tuesday for that reason, because it's the day of the week where God said it should be good twice. To make up for the day on Monday, He didn't say it was good because it wasn't complete then. Just like the idea of the breaking up of the Sephiros into 10 parts, that's not the purpose. The purpose is not to be broken. It's to be broken in order that they can be reunified in a way where there is an input from the lower worlds, from us, from human beings, to connect this, to reconnect the 10 spheres into what we call partzufim, right? Where the relationship between us and God is not just God's just one light, an unbearable light where we can't perceive Him, right? And not a broken up light for our purposes, but it loses its whole potency, yeah? Because now you've got, God can reveal His light through the 10 individual separate spheres, but they will break. You don't really appreciate God now. We can appreciate the spheres now, but the spheres no longer represent God and what He's trying to portray to us. Now, when we put all the 10 spheres together, you have the harmony of the 10 spheros. That's called Barutim, streak. Now you've got the 10 spheros, which are individual, but they're all connected as well. It's beautiful, right? You see the archetype. That's what I was saying before. We're going to Ramchal, right? Yeah. We're showing you the archetype which the Ramchal seems to be basing his ideas on. Maybe consciously or not consciously, for him it was all one. It was very clear to him. So he didn't have to speak things out like this probably in his own mind. It was just obvious. But so so the archetype of creation is Akudim The 10 spheres, God's emanation, the way we perceive God, that's what the sephiros are. We perceive his 10 attributes, kindness, wisdom, etc., as a oneness. Then they get broken up into parts to give us access. That's God creating the world. That's the second stage, right? Bereshis bo Elokim, Elokim created. Elokim is midas hadin. That's the attribute of justice and control and distance, a judge, right? So that gives a place for the world to exist. Then in chapter 2, verse 4, it says when Hashem actually did make the world, it was B'yom Asos, he made practically Eretz Hashemayim, earth and heavens. It says Hashem, B'yom Asos Hashem Elokim Eretz Hashemayim. It brings the word Yukei Vovkei, which is the name which refers to God's mercy, which is the name of Tiferes, which is the harmony of two opposites. Right? So this idea of you've got a broken world, but now we can reconnect it. It's only through mercy that we're able to get time to rectify the world and do our work here. Otherwise, if God was just absolute justice, we couldn't. Not only could we not have time to do the right thing, and if we make a mistake, we'd just be destroyed, measure for measure, because that's what justice is. We wouldn't be able to exist, because how do you deserve to exist? You have to have created yourself to be able to exist, if you're only using pure justice, measure for measure. That's the concept of measure for measure. Justice means you get exactly what you've done. Yeah? You work for me to make a piano, your reward is the piano. If you really want to analyze it, it's the making of the piano even is the reward. Work is its own reward. But okay, I'm not going to get that deep into the analogy there. Okay. Okay, so we see that this idea of a whole concept breaking up into parts and then reunifying it. So that's how we have to think about things. And it parallels very, very deep ideas at the root of creation itself. Okay, and that's the idea of Chochmah B'das. Now we understand a very nice explanation of the first of the three sephiros. Well, if you include Keser, it's really the first one. Sometimes we only focus on Chochmah, Binah and Da'as. Sometimes we focus on the Keser, Chochmah, Binah. But as we said, it's really there's four, but Da'as, it's really three. Keser, Chochmah, Binah, and Da'as is really the essence being drawn out from the Chochmah, Binah, being sort of consolidated, right, in order to pass on to the next level, which would be in the form of the human being, will be the body and the spinal cord, and basically the functioning of the limbs of the body, which would be the other six sephiros, and the Malchus would be the expression to the next level. Okay, so we see from here the importance of thinking right brain, and this is why I started the channel, because I saw so many people speaking about certain topics, and many times they were absolutely right, but they were saying it in such a way where I felt it's such a shame that people listening don't know the beauty of what they're hearing here. They're hearing this concept here, they think, oh, that's nice, let's go home and get on with our life. And then they hear another concept, yeah, so, oh wow, it's another new concept. And they're constantly getting flashes of ideas, that's nice. And if they're not critical thinkers, they're not striving for the truth, then fine. But for people who really thirst for knowledge and understanding and wisdom, it's so frustrating hearing all these ideas and like, oh, I heard this lecture once, I heard that lecture once, and you just have to pull it out if you remember it or not. And remember, the Ramchal says you can't remember details. We can't remember all details. That's not how the memory is designed, right? Yeah, you need tricks. Even people who memorize ridiculous like strings of numbers, they don't memorize things like 17532. Yeah, 175. Oh, 175. That's kind of, I know where that is on the number scale. It's just like 7/8 of 200 or whatever. Yeah, 234. Oh, that's a nice little pattern there. 234. Or you might associate it with a page in the book. I always remember page 234 is where Musaf is, I think, where the the second prayer of the Sabbath day starts in the prayer book I was brought up with, 234. So I always remembered that, right? So that's got some meaning. It's not just the individual numbers which I'm memorizing. It's the whole. It's the phrase. It's the 234, 234. Right. I still remember 240. That's in Kelekenu. That's after the end of the standing prayer. Right. That's where we start singing the songs there and the Sabbath towards the end of the service. Right. I think page 53 was where the Shema was. Right. So I've got associations with numbers. Right. So you see, people who memorize like whole decks of cards, they create pictures and stories to link the details together to make to lessen the burden on the mind to memorize individual details, because otherwise they'd have to go 173, 173, 1734, like a Simon Says sort of thing, right? They're literally memorizing things one after the other without any patterns. Very, very hard. So what I try to do is my lectures, I try to base things on the Ramchal, which is a very convenient way if I'm trying to give people a concept, the totality of concepts, and help people really appreciate the beauty of Torah. It's not just a whole collection of ideas. Of course, it's a collection of a myriad of millions of concepts, literally, probably way more than millions. But they've all got a harmony. They all come from part of a structure. It's like a tree, and you've got the big branches, and you've got the small branches branching off them, right? And then you've got the twigs, and you've got the leaves, and you've got fruits. Yeah, a tree is a beautiful thing to look at. Why? Because you're seeing so many details, but you're seeing a whole at the same time. That's what beauty is. Beauty is a harmony of different elements, right? If you look at a picture which is just white, it's clean. That's like Akudim. That's just the whole picture, but you don't see any details. All right, so let's give so many details to overwhelm you. That's called modern art, right? You just got splash, color there, color there. There's no sense of anything. It's just a mess, right? That's also not beauty, right? That's just, what was it called? Sensation, right? It's just you're being bombarded. You've got, your senses are being bombarded by all the colors, and there's no logic to them. There's no thing which unifies the details together. But if you look at a picture, a beautiful picture, where you've got colors, right? Different colors, but they're drawing something. I can recognize something. Over here, I don't quite understand what's going on the side of the picture. What's the oh wow, that's actually meant to represent what's the back of this animal or whatever house. Yeah, it's kind of reflecting there. So I get an appreciation of what's on the part which I can't see. Oh, it's beautiful how the colors blend together. Yeah, so you don't get beauty if you got too much. Then what do you have? You've got a picture of black. What's black? It's a black cat in the night, right? It's just all black. And if it's all white, that's not beauty either. What is it? It's a cow eating grass, right? So where's the cow? Well, it's a white cow, so you can't see it. So where's the grass? Oh, it's eaten it already since. It's right, and so the grass is gone as well. So you just left with white because it ate all the green on the canvas, so to speak. The beauty is when you've got black and white, or colours even, but black and white, and you blend them together, you can make something beautiful. That's how you meant to think of Torah, and this reflects the way we were created. We were created in the image of God, and what's the image of God? That means how God portrays Himself to us. And how does He do it? Through akudim, nekudim, berudim, right? Through unity, right brain. Through differentiation, breaking things apart, breaking of the vessels, the breaking of the 10 sephiros, it's breaking things up into parts, and then reunifying them to be people in terms of the way that God portrays Himself as personas, like a father, mother, grandfather, right? He relates to us in the way that our parents and grandparents relate to us. Yeah, we were created with parents and grandparents as an analogy to understand God's relationship with us, right? We're just an expression of those ideas, those core ideas. So naturally, whatever happens in this world will resonate with the spiritual roots, right? So therefore, that's why we can recognize when God communicates or deals with us in certain ways. It's similar to the way a parent deals with us, right? Sometimes good things happen in the world, sometimes bad things. Sometimes God's hidden, sometimes He's revealed, right? Just like a person can, but in terms of God, let's talk about God's expression and power, as opposed to Him physically, because He's obviously not physical, right? That's what the image of God means. And so therefore, the Ramchal's not just telling you something he worked out himself. He's looking at the roots of creation and saying, this is how the mind has to work. And if you do that, if you start thinking like that, you start to understand concepts, then put them in the right categories and the right subcategories and understand the relations. Is it a part? Is it a whole? Is it a detail? Is it a principle? Or a set of details? Then you're doing the second stage and then get the whole picture at the end. That's what, then you're literally copying God. So Ramchal's got us. We think that he's just telling us a nice way to help us think, but in truth, he's actually getting us to be similar to God, which is the whole purpose of everything. It's beautiful, right? Think like this, Ramchal says, if you want to understand things, right? If you think like that, you're copying God, and you become similar to God, and that's the whole purpose of creation, to be similar to God, right? Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And that's why, hopefully, I'm trying to emulate this idea and teaching people about the principles. I'm trying to get people, don't just understand different lectures and things isolated. Listen to my lectures, hopefully, or read the Ramchal yourself if you can, or get a good teacher for it. Try to understand things by the core, by the principles. Then branch out. Now you hear lectures. Wow, I do this as well. I hear a lecture by someone who doesn't think like me at all, and I don't like his style at all, but I hear something that, wow, that, he doesn't realize what he just said. He just expressed a new idea in understanding this concept, which I've got clear already. He's added a new element, a nuance to the way that this detail relates back to the overarching principle, whatever the subject might be, right? It might be something very casual, but I'm able to appreciate it because I see the whole picture of the Torah, at least on my level. Don't profess to be like the Ramchal or anyone like that, but at least that's the way my mind functions. I try to create the picture the best I can. So when I hear details of someone who's got a very different style, I can still appreciate it because I can still connect the ideas. I can extract the ideas which he's saying and say, oh, he's saying something amazing now, right? And I've got to tell him. And sometimes they appreciate it, sometimes they don't, when I tell them what they really just said without realizing it. Yeah. So, and that's why I've done the channel, because I'm getting really fed up of people listening to ideas of the big questions about why evil exists, and hearing answers which were just half-hearted answers, or dodging the question, or not really addressing the question head on, yeah, because they don't have the whole picture. They don't have that core understanding about the process in Kabbalah, the idea of tzimtzum, the idea of God being the ultimate, and then breaking things up, creating something else, a place for something else to exist, and then reintegrating the creation with the creator as much as that's possible, right? If you understand that, you understand why there has to be evil now. That's a deeper part of the lecture we gave 2 years ago, right? On this day, the very first lecture on this channel. You understand what that means now, right? This idea of God expressing himself in a way where there's shattering where there's a void, in order that there could be something else which now becomes one with God through the fact that there was a void in the first place. In other words, God creates evil in order that we can exist and reconnect with God. Yeah? Yes. So all the lectures are hopefully, not all of them, but most of the lectures are geared towards giving you this bigger picture where you can now listen to anyone else and not just hear a linear idea. You can see the richness of the ideas of Torah and how they all connect with each other and how they are all expressions of deep fundamentals which express themselves in secondary concepts, and they expand out, and hopefully Mitzvah Hashem, with God's help, and we'll be able to appreciate the Torah in this way, when whenever we hear something, it becomes part of us very quickly because it just fits in with everything we already know, because we've got the structure already. Okay, that should be a merit for the Ramchal, who says it really changed my life. Yeah. Reading that introduction brings back memories. Like, I'm getting a bit emotional now. It really, my whole life has been in this direction because of the Ramchal and his Sefer and this beautiful introduction, which got me hooked. And now, thank God, I see such a beautiful picture of God's working of the world, and I just want to give that over to someone else as well. Like the very first Keystone lecture, I want to give. I want God to be a giver. So I want to be like Him and give to others and appreciate the beauty and the totality of the Torah. Not just get bits, get the whole picture. All right, thanks for listening, everyone, and yes, thanks for listening, and hopefully more to come. All the best.